Yo, man, can you see the mics, man?
Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how are the draft picks, how is the draft class of 2031 looking at this moment?
Pretty short, but they'll grow into it.
Wow, that's a better answer than I was expecting. I'm sorry. I was selling you short there. I wasn't meaning to.
Oof.
That was.
Oof.
I don't care. Look at me. Look at my eyes. I do not care. The Timberwolves traded. The Timberwolves traded for a player using a 2030 and 2031 pick, and that's just where we're at tonight. We're not pretending to be a football podcast. We're just gonna be talking about we're just going to be talking about both men's and women's basketball from now on. I can't see this backfiring at all. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We've got some stuff to talk about. We'll be doing a little bit of camp stuff, talking a bit about the division and things that have changed since the end of the season, changes as far as the draft is concerned, or free agents, all of that. So we'll be talking about the NFC North tonight. And we also have a mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us financially, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode. For $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription, you get access to stuff like the bonus material. You get access to the Discord, all of that, and a couple of other cool things we do throughout the year over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful items like beach towels, t-shirts. The magnets are cool. We got the Arif Wigglers over there as well. And a special note, in regards to an announcement we made last episode. Yeah, about that, where we announced that we were going to be in London this year for the London game.
As often happens on the show, we told a partial truth for sure.
Well, at the time, it was true, and as
one would have a difficult time making the argument that we were being dishonest, but history has revealed us to be liars once again.
That's not how I would put it. I will not be attending London this year. I found out in June this year, so that's much earlier than last time that I found out I couldn't go to London, so there is that. I will not be attending this year. Unfortunately, I'm going to need back surgery at the end of August. I'm glad at least I found out now, as opposed to like the week of. That, back surgery is not the most fun way to miss something, but at least I didn't even really get a chance to get my hopes up, quite frankly, about the whole London thing. So I will not be attending. Arif is still booked, so Arif will be there. We may be sending someone else in my stead. We will see. I wonder what Luke's doing. I bet that would be fun.
That is an unrelated question, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Abstractly, I don't know what Luke is doing. Hopefully, I will not find out.
That's we'll put a pin in that.
No, we won't. We don't have to do any of that. We don't have to circle back to that question at all.
Look, you're the talent. I'm the producer. Let me produce. So, but I will not be. God. I will not be attending this year, unfortunately. So,
here's a little behind the scenes production secret I'm going to share with everyone.
I hate you
whenever anyone says the word talent, like on a television show or a podcast, it is said with the deepest sarcasm. It is an insult. That's just what it is. The industry term for being the person at the news desk or being the person who is supposed to present the context is talent, but also Yeah, that's not how they say it.
Here, I thought you were going to say that your initial reaction when I told you that I wasn't going to be able to go to London was, oh my god, also this is really great for the bit.
It is great for the bit. I can't separate myself from, I was talking to my therapist today, and she's like, every time you bring up like an emotion you have, you pull it apart and look at it, and you try to dig down at the cause. And while that's fine, you should be doing that every so often. It seems like you do that for everything all the time, and that feels unhealthy.
What does she know? Come on.
What does she? Come on. You're just making that up. But yeah, I'm a little separated from the things that I think at the time, and then I look at the things that I think. And the thing that I thought is, it's a great bit. It's great for the bit.
Yeah. I'll be thinking that a lot when I'm going, 3 3/4 Ursay there while I'm lying. While I'm lying down. I should be somewhat human by the time the regular season starts. Well, those episodes at the end of, or at the very beginning of September, those are gonna be fantastic. I can't wait for those painkiller episodes.
In one sense, you will be flying, I suppose.
Yeah, that cannot wait. And with that, let's get into the actual show itself. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. The first thing that I want to bring up is camp stuff. We don't have a lot of Vikings news to talk about because it's the end of June. And as a result, unless your players are going off to, not appear at mandatory stuff and going off to do a bunch of drugs, we don't have news about that.
But enough about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, we don't have anything about that for the Vikings this year. But that's a New York problem, not us. So what's been said so far about mandatory camps, and how is the team looking?
They're looking great. They're going to go undefeated.
Excellent. Next bit.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, just, based off of the way that people have interacted with minicamp, mandatory minicamp, OTAs, etc., it very much seems like Sam Darnold is locked into the starting quarterback job, something that we said was likely going to be the case, something you've probably already heard from a bunch of places around the Viking sphere. Darnold apparently only threw one interception in camp, or in minicamp, I suppose, and that might have even been the receiver's fault. So great. He's traditionally an aggressive quarterback, so I don't think that this is an example of him being overly cautious. If you hear about somebody not throwing interceptions in camp, that can be a red flag because it means they're not using practice time to practice and figure out kind of what the limits of their capabilities are in a particular offense or scheme. That is not a concern with the way that Darnold tends to play for me. So it's something to keep an eye on if he's not challenging himself. But, that's something. McCarthy is reworking his mechanics from the ground up. I don't expect to see him anytime soon. According to reports, Aaron Jones is motivated. Look, it's camp. There's not like a ton here to go with. Brandon Powell has a legit shot at the wide receiver 3 job. That's an important thing to figure out. Jalen Naylor is obviously going to be a big part of that. Christian Jackson might be a part of that. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait for a surprise from somebody to show up, whether that's, somebody that they brought in like Trent Sherfield, or somebody that was on the practice squad like Malik Knowles, or an undrafted free agent, not like the one they just released, Devron Harper, but like Deshaun Jones or something. By the way, they released Devron Harper and signed a UFL edge rusher, which for the first time in a long time, I've not been watching a lot of spring football, so I don't have a ton of Jalen Redmond takes for everybody. I've been too busy watching the WNBA.
I was going to say, you've watched games that Case Cookus has started, but sadly there was not a lot of them this year.
Not a ton of them. We'll get into that in the mailbag. But yeah, TJ Hawkinson seems to be ahead of the schedule that we anticipated for him. N'Keal Harry is a tight end, so remember that when you see a roster. The offensive line is probably Blake Brandel at left guard, but it could be Dalton Risner. It could be Dalton Risner at right guard, that Ingram not starting. I don't know. The way they talked about it made it seem like that was a possibility. It seems unlikely to me. Yeah, there's a lot of edge rushers. You already knew that. There's not a lot of defensive tackles. A lot of names at defensive tackle, like Jerry Tillery, but like, in terms of actual talent, it doesn't seem like there's that much, especially pass rushing talent. So that's going to have to be a next year project. But a lot of edge rushers, which is nice. Andre Carter seems to be at the bottom of the depth chart. It seems like only undrafted rookies are behind him, and it feels like that might not even last. So I don't know. We might be at the end of the Andre Carter era. Gabriel Murphy, suit up. But yeah, linebacker Blake Cashman is starting. Ivan Pace is starting. Brian Asamoah might not be the third linebacker. Who knows? It could be Kamu Grugier-Hill. But yeah, not a ton to add there. Shaq Griffin starting cornerback next to Byron Murphy. The third cornerback might be Mekhi Blackman. It might be Kyrie Jackson. That's going to be a battle. The problem, of course, is that if Byron Murphy is an outside receiver, then a Caleb Evans can't play. But if Byron Murphy is as an outside only receiver, but the Vikings signed him with the anticipation of kicking him inside. So if Kyrie Jackson or Caleb Evans aren't good enough to play on the outside, and Mekhi Blackman is your guy, then Murphy's going to have to play on the outside, and then Blackman is just there by default. So that's going to be kind of interesting to figure out. Dwight McLaughlin Jr. At Freeze Football just had a thread about him, so check that out. Or Fries Football, it's spelled Fries, but I think it's pronounced Freeze. If you're listening, correct me. Safety. Josh Metellus is still there. That's nice. Theo Jackson. He's ahead of Lewis Cine on the depth chart. Najee Thompson, now technically a safety. Not sure that matters. Will Reichert is probably winning the kicker battle. Ryan Wright is probably winning the punter battle. And then there's no long snapper battle. There you go.
So I realize my priorities are going to be different than, say, the average Vikings fan.
Than like a normal person, yeah.
I'm familiar. Why exactly? I know they brought somebody in potentially for Ryan Wright to battle with or whatever. What is the real purpose behind that, other than maybe like cutting a bit of money?
I mean, Wright wasn't as good this year as he was last year. So that's something, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's so there's like a couple of reasons that you would do that, right? One is what I just said. He had like more touchbacks on his kicks. He couldn't nail things inside the 20 as often. He shanked a little bit more. That the hang time wasn't as good. So that's all kind of part of it. But there's like even if you were pretty confident he was going to turn out to be a good player again this year, the reason that you would do that is because it's better to have your contact list updated, right? You've got a good understanding of how valuable this guy in your contact list is. And so you don't have to go through a bunch of the same stuff teaching him if Ryan Wright gets injured and you have to sign someone midseason. It could be the guy that you brought in for camp, who's already familiar with the long snapper, who already knows what Matt Daniels wants to do as a special teamer, right? Or as a special teams coordinator. Like all of that's like very convenient. So it's good to have that as kind of essentially shadow depth, right? As a backup that exists out there in the ether, instead of having that on your roster. So he's taking up a 90-man roster spot, but he's probably not taking up a 53-man roster spot or a 16-person practice squad spot. But rather, he exists as somebody you're more familiar with than anybody else. And if that familiarity tells you something positive, you're probably going to sign him more than you are a guy whose only experience that you have is like a Tuesday morning workout in the practice facility, which is not going to give you as much information as training camp. So that would be the other reason.
And there's no battle at fullback this year. We're set with Ham.
Always good
to be prepared with Ham. And, I mean, he's still making an obscene amount of money for a fullback.
Fullback, yeah, he's loaded.
It seems silly, but like, is Juszczyk making more at this point?
Oh yeah, almost certainly. I mean, I haven't checked, but yes.
Yeah, it's like the top two fullbacks in the league, and there is a bit of a. Admittedly, I'm a big CJ Ham fan, but like, there's big. I know you're shocked, but there's a big gap in talent, as it turns out, between like number 1 and number 2 in the league. It's not.
Yeah.
He's not. Hopefully, with McCarthy and Darnold, he's not being asked to run a route 30, 40 yards down the field again.
Right, again, yeah. No, yeah, it's a different ballgame with Juszczyk, for sure. I will say, as a pure blocking fullback, I'd probably rather have Ingold or Ricard. But yeah, I mean, Ham is quite
especially around Thanksgiving. I'm saying that for your sake. There's been some some turkey truthing happening.
I've seen it in the Discord. Yeah, I've seen it. It's what's happening, man. Society used to be better.
I'm gonna leave that.
This is not the Discord I loved.
I'm not. I'm gonna leave this. I'm gonna leave that alone before something else happens with it. There's really not much more we can mention about camp stuff. I mean, the important dates are coming up here in July, but otherwise, that's really about the start of things, which I suppose will mean that we've been around for 11 years.
Oh God. Okay, great. Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the support, everyone.
So we'll get to the important dates next episode. As far as the lineups and things, and the preseason stuff has been set. So, but yeah, let's look at something else, something we don't often kind of stop and take stock of. Let's look at the rest of the NFC North, and the first team I want to take a look at is the Chicago Bears, because they had the number 1 pick this year. They've jettisoned their quarterback over to Pittsburgh. He's probably not going to start this year.
No, you got Russell Wilson. Why would you?
Yep, you've got Russell Wilson. Why would you need depth after that? Yeah. So let's look at the Chicago Bears. What are, other than Caleb, other than signing Caleb Williams, what else have they done?
I mean, so they had a really tremendous offseason in a number of respects. So just in the draft alone, so there's much more than the draft going on with the Bears, but just in the draft alone, in addition to getting Caleb Williams, the top quarterback prospect, one of the better quarterback prospects that we've had over the past couple of years, not quite Trevor Lawrence level, but quite valuable as a prospect. That's huge. But also in the first round, they got Rome Odunze. If you pair that with the fact that they traded for Keenan Allen from the Chargers, and the fact that last year near the deadline, they traded for DJ Moore, which is how they got the not last year at the deadline, 2 years at the deadline, and then anyway, they got DJ Moore. You have a really great receiver core. The growth of that offensive line with Braxton Jones at left tackle, a former 5th round pick, Darnell Wright at right tackle they drafted last year. All of that together would give you a very solid offensive supporting cast. And people were arguing that this is probably the best supporting cast a first overall pick has had in a very, very long time. So those are all important elements of what the Bears did. On top of that, they signed DeAndre Swift, $8 million contract, or $8 million per year contract. So on offense, they've got a fairly interesting setup. Now, I think Swift tends to be more productive than talented, which is to say that it is difficult to project him to continue to produce at the level that he's produced at before. But with a good offensive line and a receiver core that threatening, it might not matter. On defense, they also had a really good offseason. It's it sucks, right? The Bears had such a great offseason. The cool thing is that we can say that about the Bears because we've said that for 3 consecutive years and it hasn't helped them. Wow, the Bears had a great offseason. They still stink. Fantastic. I love that for them.
It's been good. It's been good, easy money to bet the Bears under the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So that was great. But this one, this might be, if it hasn't worked out for his previous times, it might work out this time, having a good offseason. So obviously they didn't sign any linebackers to start or anything like that. They've still got those 2 expensive albatrosses there. But On top of that, they traded for Montez Sweat, who I do think is genuinely quite a talented edge rusher. I think a lot of people, like at least when I'm having fairly casual discussions with people about this, a lot of people kind of, I'm not going to say confuse Montez Sweat for Chase Young, but let their opinions of Chase Young creep into their opinions of Montez Sweat, and they think that he's not that good. No, he's like pretty good. They have DeMarcus Walker. It's a their pass rush unit like 2-3 years ago was like Trevin Gibson. Like it was like not good. This one is not like amazing, but it's like reasonable, which then allows the secondary, which is pretty young and pretty talented. Plus they signed Kevin Byard to really like take off, right? So they were able to extend Jalen Johnson, who had such a wonderful year last year. Jaquan Brisker's coming off of a pretty good year as a former second-round pick. I think Tyreek Stevenson, I don't know if he made a jump or anything like that, but he has a little bit of talent, and Kyler Gordon didn't play that poorly. So they've got like a pretty good secondary to go with it. Like obviously if this team does well, it'll be because, the offense is coming together, but the defense is certainly not a liability, which is an upgrade from where they've been in the past. So, also they drafted a punter, the Iowa punter, Torrey Taylor. If you talk to like Iowa people, first of all, don't do that. Come on, you'll get cooties. Don't do that. But if you do happen to run into an Iowa fan, to your misfortune, they will both lament the importance that Iowa has placed on punters and curse their offensive coordinator was legitimately quite bad. That they wrote in, I don't know college football, so take this with a grain of salt, but they wrote in the contract that because it was the coach's son, like Ferentz, right? They wrote in the contract that he had to get fired if he didn't produce enough points by the end of the season, like, which I've never seen before. But they're like, okay, you promoted this guy, he sucks. The new deal, if he continues to suck, he's fired. You don't like, that's it. That's in the contract. So he's a really bad offensive coordinator. But they punt in crazy situations, like they punt on 4th and 1 and stuff like that. So they hate the amount of times they punt. They hate the memes about them punting. They hate that the offense is so lackluster that they're all-world defense, and it was legitimately an astounding defense over the last 2 years. Just gets kind of wasted. But they love this punter. Holy crap. They adore this dude. Like Iowa fans who are also Minnesota Vikings fans who also follow me and understand how seriously I would take the next sentence would say he is a game-changing punter. With like full knowledge of how skeptical I am of this kind of claim and how funny that sounds. They were like, yeah, I know I sound like an idiot when I say it, but I'm just going to say it. Multiple people. This guy's a game-changing punter. He will scare you. And, it's that. I'm going to have to be scared before I anticipate that kind of fright. But, okay, a lot of regard for this guy. Drafting punters and drafting kickers, not the same thing. Don't draft kickers. So sorry, Vikings fans. Will Reichert might be different, but for the most part, don't draft kickers. Drafted punters generally outproduce undrafted punters by statistically significant, and from my understanding of the data, generally like noticeably significant pace past their undrafted counterparts. So, and draft position tends to correlate with quality at the position as well. Again, not as much as other positions, but certainly it suggests that they can at least evaluate punters well. This guy goes in the 4th round. He's well regarded as a punter. Watch out. I assume this means long hang time and a high degree of accuracy and a really high rate of punts inside the 10, punts inside the 5 without a high rate of touchbacks. That's my guess. This guy's had a ton of reps anyway, so at least you know that there's no lack of punts on the film. There's the Bears, punting gods.
If they had a coach that knew how to use, I say outside of the punting, knew how to use all those tools, they might be dangerous.
I'm confident that they could turn that punt into a weapon.
That's I like that. Let's look at the Lions, the division champs last year. A lot of expectations now that they have gotten out of the cellar. Is that something that is possible to continue for the next year, or is it going to be a wonderful return to irrelevancy?
I mean, the expectations are to repeat, and it's difficult to get into the NFC Championship game. So I would imagine that to some degree, I mean, obviously everybody's expectations will be different. People expect them to win the division, and I also do that. I also expect that. But the degree of their overperformance relative to other teams in the NFC, I imagine that they won't like live up to that. But they're the best team in the division to me. So somewhere in the middle between a true disappointment and validating their success last year. So a disappointment to their optimists, I suppose. Their offseason wasn't as meteoric as the Bears. How could it be, first of all? But it was pretty efficient, right? I don't know that grabbing Marcus Davenport, we'll start on the defense. I don't know that grabbing Marcus Davenport was necessarily the smartest move, but I think analytically you take a look at it and you can see where it comes from, right? Because injury proneness is a thing we tend to overestimate. Quality on the snaps that you play help project quality on the snaps that you don't play. So even if you don't have a lot of volume, if you're efficient, enough reps will produce volume for you, that kind of stuff, right? I don't think Marcus Davenport is going to see the field all that often, and I don't know about relying on him, but certainly I think he's in a high leverage spot for them in terms of pass rush, and so if they don't get a lot out of him, that pass rush is going to continue to be not as hot as like the rest of the stuff that they do. They did lose some players on defense, and I think that not having the safety nickel, whatever his name is, that is a saint, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That's going to suck, but for the most part, they made a bunch of good moves, and they're hoping to build on the success of the draft class that they had last year. Aiden Hutchinson's still there. He's still a solid run defender and a pretty decent pressure producer. I think Aiden Hutchinson is kind of in between like a really solid primary pass rusher and a high-level secondary pass rusher, kind of like a Brian Robinson would be how I'd characterize that second category. And I think that he could take that next step. It wouldn't shock me if he did, but I think the Lions lacking a clearly solid pass rusher kind of hurts them. That said, the tackles are going to, once again, be insanely tough to run against. So Aleem McNeil run stuffer, DJ Reader run stuffer. They drafted Mekhi Wingo from LSU, run stuffer. They, over the past couple of drafts, they've added people like Levi Onwuzurike, Broderick Martin, both run stuffers. Onwuzurike is like the worst pass rush win rate of any defensive tackle, I think, over the past 3 years. They don't care. None of these guys are rushing the passer, I guess. So they're going to be tough to run against. At linebacker, it's going to depend on if Anzalone can stay healthy. Largely for the Lions, he has. Jack Campbell he started off hot, but I think most Lions fans kind of regard him as a disappointment at linebacker. If any of them are listening, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I think that they probably have some room to improve here at linebacker. Malcolm Rodriguez played really well when asked, given the fact that he was like a sixth round sophomore last year, rookie 2 years ago. But I think that as a starter, probably not enough. They grabbed Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay. Fantastic move. They drafted Terrion Arnold. For anybody who listened to me rant about the Vikings trading up for Dallas Turner, this was the target if you didn't get him, if you didn't trade up. I thought that this was a wonderful pick. They still have Brian Branch, very good player for what the Lions ask him to do. I don't know that he's actually all that good at all that other stuff that teams often ask these kinds of players to do, to be like a hybrid safety corner. But the Lions ask him to do stuff that's well within his skill set. And then Kirby Joseph, a player who I don't think is dirty, but everyone else does. So keep that in mind. So that's the defense. Offense, not much has changed. Still Sam Laporta, still the same offensive line. Taylor Decker, Kevin Zeitler, Penei Sewell, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow. Great. Ragnow's going to be entering the season healthy this year, so that's going to be good. They added some developmental guys, Christian Mahogany from Boston College, Giovanni Manu from Canada, British Columbia, I think. Great, but nothing changes there. Receiver, I think that's probably the area of concern. Obviously, they got Amon-Ra St. Brown, but after that, it's like Khalif Raymond and Jamison Williams, and we don't know if there's anything with Jamison Williams. And they added Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I don't know. Not a lot going on there, but Jared Goff, right? So if Amon-Ra St. Brown is enough, if Sam Laporta is enough, Jared Goff will produce. So, yeah, not a ton of changes on offense. They still have David Montgomery. They added Sione Vaki in the draft. He's a safety-ish out of Utah, but he also played running back for them. And the Lions have indicated that he's going to play running back for them here, which I actually agree with. I thought he was a better running back than safety, so that was actually smart. I don't know if I would have drafted that guy in the 4th round though, to engage in kind of position change. That was weird, but hey, they nailed the 1st round pick according to the stuff I know about the draft, which is not much, but more than most, I guess, because the consensus board. Great pick, but not a ton of impact outside of that in terms of what they've added in the offseason.
And of course, we have the Green Bay Packers to
yes.
I was gonna say my thoughts on the Packers may have been altered slightly just because they have 3 kickers on their squad right now. Is that right? 3?
3. All related to the division in some capacity. So we'll start there. F it. They signed Greg Joseph, which, power to you. I hope you're happy with that, I guess. They have Anders Carlson, the brother of Daniel Carlson, and then they grabbed James Turner off of waivers from Detroit. So they saw the kickers in the division, somehow grew envious of that. I couldn't tell you. I don't know how, but sure, fine. Like, I know that Anders Carlson wasn't great, but they largely expect him to be the kicker next year, and they expect him to improve, and they're bringing in competition. Fantastic. All the stuff I talked about competition at punter for the Vikings a couple of minutes ago, I guess applies here, but it is funny. And they didn't add a ton of bodies. So, yeah, good job there. They're keeping the same punter. Don't know anything about him. They've got a competition at long snapper, I guess. I hope that works out for you. I don't have another. Great. Good. I hope the guy doesn't get hurt.
Is Justice ready to break down some long snapper film?
He will. He'll do it. He's like when they do the green and gold game or whatever they call it. Yeah, he's 100% doing it.
That is fantastic.
I still remember when he was breaking down edge rushers exclusively for Bleacher Report way back. He used punt block tape from Shane Ray to prove that Shane Ray wasn't that athletic. And it was just like, okay, the fact that you ended up being kind of right is very stupid, but come on, man. It's a punt block rep.
I love that. It's the dumbest. Like, it's the sort of thing that you just look at and go, I can't believe you wasted so much time on this. I am both envious of the amount of time you have to waste and a bit jealous that you were able to reach this level of hater.
It was truly special. He got like a ton of crap for it, and I enjoyed that. But he turned out to be right, so that really kind of blunts the edge there.
So the rest of Green Bay, outside of the fact that they're doing I think I described it in the pre-show, having that many kickers all related to other NFC North teams seems like the football version of trying to own the libs.
That's wonderful. I love that. You're just signing kickers out of spite.
Yeah.
No real plan or purpose. Just F you. You have a kicker? No, you don't. He's mine.
Spite kickers.
But yeah, I guess they made some changes in offense and defense. We can talk about that. Offense, Jordan Love, great quarterback, best quarterback of all time. If you look at what he did in the playoffs, it was really remarkable. So the Packers have a quarterback of the future. For anyone not picking up on the sarcasm, I wrote a piece about Jordan Love. It was not well received by Packers fans who decided that because I have covered the Vikings in the past, that somehow I used motivated reasoning to argue that Jordan Love was bad, which I didn't. My piece didn't say that he was bad. But that, whatever, it's the internet. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding Jordan Love, so we'll see kind of how that goes. But not a ton of changes on that front. They did sign Josh Jacobs at running back. They did draft Marshawn Lloyd at running back, presumably in response to Aaron Jones leaving. Spite running back, right? But yeah, Jacobs was a rushing yardage leader. He's a pretty good running back. I think that his volumetric totals overstate his case, but he's a good running back. So, and the running game was awful last year because A.J. Dillon just isn't good anymore. I think secretly there's the possibility that Emmanuel Wilson, an undrafted free agent from last year, might actually be their best running back. I think that the odds are low, but my odds of that happening are probably higher than everyone else's. So everyone else might put it at like a 2% chance that he's the best running back on the roster, given that they just signed Josh Jacobs and drafted a third-round pick. I'd say the odds are closer to 10%. I really like Emmanuel Wilson, and it sucks that he's good. So there's that. They're going to continue with the plan they've had at receiver and tight end, which was all of the draft picks. So they've got Luke Musgrave, a second-round pick. They've got Tucker Kraft, a third-round pick, and arguably better than Luke Musgrave. They've got Christian Watson, their worst receiver of all the potential starters. And I'm not saying that because of NDSU. I just, like, if you watch people try to rank the Packers receivers, Watson is not received kindly among that group of four. Romeo Doubs, on and off, interesting. Some people make the argument that Dontavian Wicks is the best receiver out of that group of four. Other people make the argument that it's Jaden Reed. Personally, I think it's Jaden Reed, but maybe I only think that because Jaden Reed has done his damage against the Vikings and Dontavian Wicks did it against somebody else. But that's my read is that wasn't meant to be a pun. But yeah, the way I read the situation is that Jaden Reed is probably the better of the two. Kind of doesn't matter. They'll continue to have like a 4-person receiver competition. Samori Toure is probably going to show up in there somewhere. Malik Heath, Bo Melton, all those guys they just added. So it's an interesting receiver group. It's going to grow with Jordan Love, but I don't think it's necessarily a good receiver group quite yet. On the offensive line, they added one player of note. They did add another 2 players in the draft. Travis Glover, a guy that I followed really closely for some reason for a late round pick during the Senior Bowl, from Georgia State ? Blue Helmet, whatever Georgia school that is. Jacob Monk in the 5th round. They're not expected to do anything this year. But they drafted Jordan Morgan in the 1st round. It was a slight reach according to the consensus board. There was a significant debate in my mentions, this time not one I started, about how much of a reach you're allowed to make against the consensus board before you call it a reach. So I guess if you want a context for how much of a reach it was enough for people to argue about it. But the rest of that's the same. They really needed to grab a guy to play guard for them because Zach Tom is probably quite good based off of the evidence that we've seen. Rasheed Walker, they're going to give him a lot of chances to be the left tackle. Elton Jenkins is good. Josh Myers is good. So that offensive line is not as bad as I had hoped it would be given how much change it's had over the past 3 years, which is unfortunate. Defense, they added a bunch of people. It seems like every time the Packers draft defensive players, bad move. Why did they do that? These players aren't good. The last time they drafted like a good defensive player, I refused to recognize that he was good, and then he got hurt for the season right after I made fun of him to Justice Mosqueda. That is Eric Stokes, who Packers fans insist is quite good, and they kept the receipts on me saying he was bad, and then couldn't do anything with it because he couldn't prove me wrong because he got hurt for the full year. Anyway, they expect him to be fully healthy and back. And if he's bad, it'll be because of the injury and not because I was right. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
But they've got Carrington Valentine, who is far better than your typical 7th round pick. He was a 7th round pick last year. He's not good, but far better than a 7th round pick. They have Xavier McKinney. They added Javon Bullard in the draft at safety. They've had problems at safety for a long time. I imagine that adding Jeff Hafley as their defensive coordinator is going to be kind of supposed to be the solution to a lot of their problems. They've got Keyshawn Nixon at the nickel. He's more of a kick returner than he is a corner, but he's actually not bad as a nickel corner. They added Kalen King in the 7th round. He's an interesting player, played for Penn State, was supposed to be a potential first-round pick. By the time the season ended and he was like being projected across the draft, like around the Senior Bowl, he was like a 4th-round pick. And they did really poorly at the Senior Bowl, and I guess he turned out to be a 7th-round pick. I don't know that those last 2 sentences are related, but they happen in sequential order, so I feel like one caused the other. They also added Edgerrin Cooper in the 2nd round along with Javon Bullard at linebacker. They're going to need Quay Walker to take a big step forward at linebacker for them to be comfortable with the position. They've not been comfortable at the position since like Desmond Bishop, right? It was like AJ Hawk and Desmond Bishop, like the last good linebackers.
It's been some time.
Yeah, and I don't want to like gloss over how good Devondre Campbell was for the one good year, but like comfortable with the guy for more than a year is a very precarious position for them to be in. They just haven't been able to do it. So Quay Walker hasn't done it yet. Hopefully this Texas guy can do it. Edgerrin Cooper was all over the consensus board. Some people had him ranked in the 1st round in the 20s. Some people had him ranked at like, I think he ended up 37 or so the consensus board. Some people had him ranked in like the 100s, all over the place. Not a good linebacker class. They grabbed one of the top linebackers of this bad linebacker class. Who's to say? Preston Smith, the thing, I guess, this year is that Hafley will know how to use him and play him at his more natural position or something. That's what I keep hearing. Good for him. I think he's washed. He was extremely underrated when he was with Washington and 1 or 2 years of the Packers, and now I don't know that he has it anymore. Rashawn Gary, I'm genuinely concerned about this guy. I think he is underrated, actually. I imagine Hafley will use him well, but I don't know that at this point there is a wrong use for him. I think he'll produce. Kenny Clark, I don't want to say anything bad in case it comes to haunt me. He was the best nose tackle in football for a while, and he probably still has that in him, but he hasn't lived up to that for the past 2 years. So if you think that means he's bad now, go for it. This guy terrifies me. Devontae Wyatt, the opposite. This guy does not terrify me at all. He's bad. That's the Packers. There you go. Oh, Lucas Van Ness, 1st-round pick from last year. Also bad. Anyway, that's the Packers.
Keep hearing about injury problems with the Packers. I feel like they just need some good healing. I also heard that the Jordan Love got engaged this offseason. It's just odd that the Packers have a quarterback that nobody really talks about at the moment. It's I'm not used to it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think a normal approach to health and a normal approach to relationships is not normal.
And family.
What are they doing over there? Yeah, and family. What are they doing over there?
I mean, people go to Green Bay to play with Jordan Love. They don't go there for anything else. By the way,
right, yeah, exactly.
Georgia State is the blue helmet.
I was right. I think I said Georgia State. Yeah, I was right.
So just wanted you to feel some form of comfort on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was haunting me. If you want to see a busted offense, see if you can find your way into some Georgia State film. That is some of the stupidest offensive design I've ever seen. Just a bunch of nonsense. They got guy like, okay, so they had Travis Glover. I watched way too much of this guy. They had Travis Glover out on an island, which is not unusual for a draft pick at a G5 school on the offensive line. But he was out on an island like 8 feet away from the rest of the offensive line. Like at some point you're thinking like, well, if I was an edge rusher, I'd stop worrying about alignment and just line up to the inside of this guy. That's crazy. But what's even stupider is that the left guard was the worst player on the field. And so he would have to just sprint over there to help this guy. Like, what are you doing? And then they would do these crazy inside handoffs, these stupid design zone reads. I don't know, man, but this guy was a crazy athlete. Anyway, if you want your brain to break looking at an offense, like check out how they treated that offensive line at Georgia State. That's my super nerdy, sometimes I watch film take for all of you. Insane situation.
I'm just debating whether or not when the EA college football game comes out, whether or not to broadcast that over either Twitch or over the Discord, just to watch James Madison have like 5 championship titles in a row.
Yeah, just in time. Yeah.
I feel like it may be necessary to bring
Oh
one back
man,
to JMU.
You just bringing up JMU is not going to convince me to buy it. I wasn't going to buy it. I was just going to watch content creators do some really fun stuff with it because I like watching. I haven't done it in a while, probably because I haven't made it in a while. But I like watching these YouTubers that create like these NCAA 14 dynasties, and they have multiple seasons. Like, was it Mr. Hurricane did that with Kalispell? Whoever does, not the expert does like UGF Pandas, and there's like one more. But I like watching that stuff, and I'm probably going to start watching them again when this drops. And that was going to be how I consumed NCAA 25. But now that I could potentially play as JMU, man, I might just do that.
It might be necessary, and creating a quarterback in the name of Case Cookus as well to bring onto JMU where he should have been to begin with, quite frankly.
Right, of course, yeah. Of course. I think you can't edit the players. Like, I think as part of the settlement with the NIL settlement, they had to prevent people from being able to edit the players so that people couldn't just insert like Arch Manning, because Arch Manning opted out. They couldn't just insert Arch Manning into the game. So I might not be able to create a Case Cookus.
We have Case Cookus at home. We don't. Well, let's go to the mailbag. And apologies, as there's not a ton of Viking stuff in here because it's the end of June and there's not a lot of Viking stuff to talk about. So this goes off the rails pretty quickly, about a third of the way in. So I'll let you know when that happens if you're not interested in any of the other random show lore questions and things like that. But Charles Wrights asks, if Reisner wins the starting job, how much of a problem will his run blocking be following the upgrade from Madison to Jones?
I mean, the part of the question is like, how much of a problem also will Blake Brandel be if he wins the job, and if there's going to be a difference between the two. In the aggregate, the Vikings run blocking, at least by the metrics that we have available to us, and not quite the eye test. I think the eye test kind of disagrees, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But by the metrics, the Vikings were actually pretty decent at run blocking, and it was really just the running backs that couldn't make good on it. And I will validate that second part for sure, based off of what I saw. The running backs could not take advantage of the space created by the offensive line. I would not argue that the aggregate run blocking contribution was particularly great, maybe above average, but I think that when you take a look at run block win rate or like PFF run blocking grade, or I think even SIS run blocking points, 3 different systems that use 3 independent methodologies, by the way. So it's really important to note. All suggest that the Vikings were not just above average as run blockers, but substantially above average as run blockers. So there's a good chance my eye test could be incorrect here. But based off of what I watched, it was a pretty big problem with Dalton Reisner. I think that 1 problem out of 5 blockers is not that significant, but it is a weak link scenario where if you lose a block, that creates a tackle for loss. So, there's a little bit of push and pull with how important that can be. But I think for the most part, the Vikings will materialize an above average run game if Aaron Jones plays like he did in the second half of last year. And the reason I can say that about Aaron Jones, but not Jordan Love, is because A, the second half of last year very much matched his career performance, and so it's more likely that he plays to that level. But B, he didn't really have a first half of last year because he was hurt. So I'm not really splitting to find the best, portion of the season. That's just all we have of him. So if he plays like that, that's going to be an above average running game. Not that the Vikings are going to be running a ton relative to game situation, but yeah, it's a concern. The Vikings, from a run blocking perspective, will need to be somewhat aggressive about addressing the left guard position next year. Given all of the positional priorities they had, I'm kind of fine with them putting this one on the back burner and taking it on next year, but that is going to have to be an area where they upgrade for sure.
Next question is from Blake Allen Murphy, who asks, how good are the Seahawks looking this offseason?
Never heard of him.
All right. I mean, technically, Blake Allen Murphy's asking because, he covers the
He's a Cardinals.
covers
Yeah,
the Cardinals,
he's a Cardinals
down there.
right
So I mean,
yeah.
it's within the division. He's looking for some information, probably for his.
I don't know
job.
why I would have more information than him. I mean, he keeps track of the divisional opponents. I mean, we just did a divisional rundown. I would imagine that he would want to ask somebody that covers that division, or even especially covers this team. What is it? The Seahawks? You said.
I'm just saying, you've given 3 other team breakdowns. What's the deal with what's the problem with doing a potential 4th?
Well, first, I've never heard of this team, but second, they're not in the division. I don't have much of an incentive to keep up with them.
All right, fine. You can. I'll tell you what, Blake Allen Murphy. I am sorry that Arif decided that he doesn't want to play along and help you with your job. Let's go to Osman, who asked, the Vikings are projected to have about $69 million in cap space next offseason per over the cap, the most in the division. The Lions are projected to have about $48 million, the least in the division. Does this difference provide a functional advantage to the Vikings?
What a $21 million difference in projected cap space next year. I don't know who the Lions need to re-sign, so if it's a lot of players, obviously it's not Amon-Ra St. Brown, but if it's a lot of players, maybe not. In terms of in terms of the impact that cap space has on re-signings, it's actually not that significant because you can always manipulate the cap space, and you often do, so that your re-signings don't impact you that much in year one. So that's a small consideration, but it is a consideration. I don't really know, but I'd say generally not. If you tracked wins across. Let's say you're projecting 2025 wins at the end of the 2024 season before there were any signings. There's a number of metrics that you could use, and I imagine your model would slightly improve with the addition of cap space information for that year, right? But last year's performance is just going to matter a lot more in terms of wins or win estimates. I think it'd probably be a statistically significant, but in actuality quite small difference in win outcomes for that year and then the year after that. It's important. Many things are important. This is probably not a huge advantage, especially because the Vikings do have some re-signing still left, right? They, at some point, will want to extend Byron Murphy. They want to make a decision on Harrison Phillips. They need to, figure out what's going to happen at a number of positions where, they have short-term contracts. They've got to add a defensive tackle. They've got to add a left guard. It's tough to really use that as a projection. I'd say the fact that the Lions are probably a better team right now, or the fact that J.J. McCarthy is an unknown quantity at quarterback, those matter, I think, a lot more than this $21 million cap space difference. But it does matter a little bit.
Next question is from Pokesaurus Rex, who asks, Harrison Smith's contract has become an elephant in the room. What do the guys think should be done with it, and what do they think will be actually done?
I think he's going to play for a year and then retire, so you don't really have to worry about any of this. I think probably he's retiring at the end of this year. I haven't heard anything, so don't treat that as reporting. But then you don't have to worry. You wipe your hands clean of it. He takes the cap space with him. Was it
Danielle Hunter, or was it Anthony Barr who did the GIF or the image about how it's 2054 and Harrison Smith is signing up for one more year's service?
Yeah, I think it was Anthony Barr, but yeah. That was great. No, it's probably it. If not, there would be a restructure or something like that. I'd say, I hate doing this, but they've done it with legends in the past, but I'd probably just cut him. That's probably the solution after the year if he doesn't want to retire.
Turn into some...
You got to move on.
Yeah. Maybe if it turns into... what was the corner that Zim loved that ended up playing for a lot longer than anyone ever expected and ended up being a coach for a bit?
Terrence Newman?
Yeah, for some reason I knew Terrence. I couldn't remember if it was Terrence Newman. Yeah, maybe it's a Terrence Newman situation. Hey, you should just stay on and teach these people how to hit and not end up getting any more hits.
That was really funny. And then he like quit coaching because it was harder.
Yep. I should have kept
It was
playing.
Actually, this playing was way easier than coaching. Goodness.
Yeah. Hunter asks, where would you rank Kevin O'Connell in terms of offensive play callers?
Yeah, so I didn't want to do too much heavy lifting in response to this mailbag question, so I'm just going to be upfront and honest. I didn't think too hard. What I did is I went over to Derek Clausen's ranking of offensive play callers over at 33rd Team because he's a guy that I largely respect. If he's listening, what I mean to say is I disrespect him the least. How about that? No, I mean Clausen's really good at this stuff. So I took a look at, and he pays a lot more attention to stuff like offensive design. So, for example, when he's got Arthur Smith ranked lower, like in like around 15 or so, I forget. That's notable to me because I'm a fan of Arthur Smith's play designs, and I know Clausen is too. And so to have him ranked relatively that low tells us a lot about potentially play sequencing or other elements of play calling, like run pass balance and stuff like that, or maybe adapting to the quarterback that you have, or something else. So like those are important considerations that maybe I didn't keep in mind. So with that in mind, he had Kyle Shanahan number 1, Sean McVay number 2, Andy Reid number 3, and Mike McDaniel number 4. And I'm sure I didn't actually read his reasoning behind it because I'm prepping for this mailbag. I've got a bunch of stuff to do and I'm lazy. And I'm sure he had some difficulty with Reid because Reid is a phenomenal head coach. And on top of that, he's an offensive play caller. And so separating the two, somewhat difficult. But I'd say that this is probably correct. I might move McDaniel up to 2 and McVay down to 4, but I wouldn't really change those things. Okay, great. Then he had Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, below where he eventually ranked KOC. I disagree with that. I think Ben Johnson has done a truly phenomenal job in Detroit. And I think that his ability to maximize the players that he has is, and this is not an insult to KOC or anything like that, is wonderful. And I do have a lot of respect for Matt LaFleur, the other in-division offensive guru that's play calling. And I think that he is a very good play caller, but I am just going to put Johnson above because he's really maximizing what they do in ways that maybe innovative is the wrong word, but in ways that are creative. Yeah, that's probably better. And then I've got Matt LaFleur next. I think that he did a really, really great job with what he had. Now that you no longer have Aaron Rodgers, just changing the plays, you have like a more complete view of how he impacts the offense. And there's a lot going on there that really takes advantage of what they do well. And I think that a big part of Jordan Love's success this year in the second half of the season was actually more a product of what LaFleur was able to do than Jordan Love's inherent talent. So there's that. Then I believe he had Sean Payton here ahead of KOC. And in the piece, he specifically said, this part I did read, he specifically said that he's banking on the 20 years of play calling experience that Payton has had and less than last year. He's not really paying that much attention to that year, clouding up the results. I'm a little bit harsher, so I don't have Sean Payton ahead of KOC, which I'm confident all of you are happy about. So instead of that, I did move someone up ahead of KOC. So KOC didn't move up, but he had Shane Steichen, the Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator, just below KOC. And Steichen is tremendous. He was calling a great offense for Anthony Richardson, and then he immediately had to change when Richardson got hurt to Gardner Minshew, who's a very difficult quarterback to call an offense for. And I thought he did a phenomenal job. So it's Steichen, and then KOC at 8, and then Sean Payton at 9, and Todd Monken at 10. So Payton is below KOC.
I did enjoy, speaking of which, I did enjoy Gardner Minshew's, I guess, staff photo or whatever, team photo from the Raiders this year. It's
I'm a little it feels like he's trying now, and that kind of ruins the magic a little bit. I don't know.
You get lost in the eyes because you get the feeling that he did bring his RV again this year. Like you get that sort of feeling from him.
I get it. I love his moxie. The photo thing. It's like, okay, I like it when people lean into it, but this is a little bit too much. I don't know. I'm on the fence on that one.
Let's also question here is Is there a reason to criticize Kevin O'Connell for not implementing more pre-snap motion like some of the best offenses in the NFL?
Yes and no. I mean, there's still reasons not to do it, and it comes with like costs and trade-offs and stuff like that. So that's important to keep in mind. So up there at the top, so those 4 top play callers, they all use a fair amount of motion pre-snap, especially Mike McDaniel, who implemented a particularly unique motion last year for Tyreek Hill. I think they call it cheat motion or something like that. Well, they use like a more explicit term, I forget, but a lot of people call it cheat motion, where it's basically a short motion for Hill that gets him open. Really great stuff. So love it. I think they do a great job. But there are reasons not to do it. One, I think that it occupies a significant part of your play clock. And so if you've got a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers really doesn't like a very heavy pre-snap motion offense. And I think Tom Brady is not a huge fan of it either. If you've got a quarterback that relies a lot on changing what's happening at the line of scrimmage, your motion can restrict your options because you just have less time on the play clock. You have to get everything started at a certain time. Otherwise, that's it for you. It also, from my understanding, makes it a little bit more difficult to audible into and out of, independent of that play clock thing, and limits your range of offensive options. It gives you an advantage in some respects, like it gets your guy moving at the snap, which gives him an advantage in terms of gaining leverage. And also it reveals the defensive design in some capacity. So if there's not much movement, or if nobody moves, it's likely zone coverage. And if someone's following, it's likely man coverage. That advantage is disappearing a little bit. They're doing a little bit more to disguise, and they just shift what motion they use or what defense they use in response to the motion, as opposed to just stick to the same defense now. So there's that. But so it gives you that advantage, but there's only so many routes somebody in motion can run. And so it makes your offense a little bit more predictable as well. And so I think that generally speaking, it is better for most offenses, including the Vikings, to engage in more pre-snap motion. And so, yes, I do think there's reason to criticize. Statistically speaking, this has some pretty enormous benefits. Those, when you dig into it a little bit, those benefits accrue more for quarterbacks in the middle and closer to the bottom of the talent tier than the quarterbacks at the top. And of course, in order to really definitively make that claim, you have to identify who the quarterbacks at the top are. And if that's the case, is Tua Tagovailoa one of them, right? And if he is, because statistically he's up there, then that would suggest that pre-snap motion is good for those quarterbacks. And if he's not, and this is just pushing him into that tier, then that would suggest it provides more of a benefit to middle tier and lower tier quarterbacks. So it really depends on how you evaluate some of these things. Obviously, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, that's its own deal. But for the most part, my understanding is that it helps mid-tier quarterbacks a lot more than it helps really, really good quarterbacks, although it still helps them too statistically. So yeah, I think the aggregate effect of this would suggest that you should do it more often, but I do think that there are good reasons not to do it nearly as often.
The Real Jack asks, on the Minnesota Football Party, Arif mentioned it's better for players to get paid later. Could you walk me through how? Take a first-round pick with a 10-year career, even adjusting for salary cap increase. Isn't it more lucrative to make veteran money, not a rookie deal for 6 of those years than for 5?
Not to get paid later, to sign later. There's a difference between the two. If you're Justin Jefferson, you sign your extension after the 3rd year when you immediately have the ability to sign an extension. You will still have the same amount of money in your, because you have to have that 4th year. The extension is for the 5th year on. If you sign it after the 4th year, you will still have that same 4-year contract, and then your 5th year will change in both circumstances. Now, if you wait for the end of your 5th year option, you can make the argument, right? Because I think Justin Jefferson was slated to get $19 million, and that's a $19 million contract versus a $30 million contract. And, you know, how would a 7% increase in the cap make up for the difference in that $11 million? And you could make that argument, actually probably one way or the other, because generally speaking, unless you're Justin Jefferson, you're not actually seeing 30 million. You're seeing a much smaller average. Like, for example, with the Tyreek Hill contract, it was actually 25 million over 3 years. So if you're negotiating at the level that Tyreek Hill negotiated, which I don't think was necessarily a huge mistake or anything like that, the difference is that 19 million fifth-year option, or in cap adjusted terms, a $28 million bonus. So now the difference is just $9 million. And there's a pretty good chance that if you do sign later, so we're back at the signing later, or we're back at the getting paid later versus getting signed later. So if you get paid later, there's a pretty good chance you make up for it with the increased cap space, not just this year, but every subsequent year, because it compounds a little bit. So that's like one element of it. But really, it's better for Jefferson to wait until right before the fifth-year option than it is to sign at the beginning of his third year or whatever it is, because of the way that it's indexed to the current market and not to the anticipated market. You can see that with early extensions that generally make more sense when you take it as a percentage of cap at the time as opposed to cap of when the extension kicks in. So yeah, and if I misspoke in the previous episode or said it incorrectly, that's my mistake. But like, yeah, another year of the rookie contract wouldn't be wonderful, although it should be noted that another year is another year of the fifth-year option, which is really substantial, and not another year of rookie-level pay. It's not as if it's a $5 million contract that you're taking another year of to wait on a $30 million contract. It's rather like a $20 million or a $19 million contract that you're fulfilling through the fifth year to get a hopeful expected payout the next year. Assuming you don't get like franchise tagged, which, I mean, that's a lot of money coming in. So from a non-security standpoint, that still actually fulfills that condition. But yeah, the percentage changes are actually not that significant, even though it's a quote unquote rookie contract.
Next question is also from the Real Jack, and around now is when the mailbag is going to start to go off the rails, just letting you know. For Arif's Magic, in parentheses, the Gathering Corner, could Arif explain the current color construction of the meta roster builds in the NFL? Shanahan and McVay on offense seems very azorious, but the new McDonald-Baltimore defenses seem like they could have interesting color compositions too. Can you do this without using the color purple?
Well, I mean, they don't have the color purple in Magic the Gathering. Okay, so I haven't played Magic the Gathering in decades, so this is gonna be tough.
And yet you've answered like 3 Magic the Gathering questions.
Yes, well, that's not my fault. That's your fault and the listener's fault.
How is it my fault? Other than I'm
because you put it in the mailbag. Okay, so
the talent's mad about Magic. Sorry.
Oh Jesus. Okay, so the Chiefs are monocolor red, not because the Chiefs themselves are red, but because red is about direct damage. It's about getting out as quickly as possible. It's about having your capacities available to you right away. So, for example, there are a lot of red decks where when you summon a monster, you don't have to wait a turn before that monster can activate their abilities. That's like a feature in Magic. Instead that they can attack right away. There's a lot of direct damage spells in the deck, that kind of stuff. So that's red. I'd argue that because green decks are decks that are meant to take a lot of time, that are meant to have a bunch of heavy damage, hard-hitting creatures later in the turn cycle, or mana curve, or whatever it's called. These are things that like build up, that you need your offenses to get going. I would imagine that these are typically like Smash Mouth type offenses, like when Derrick Henry was on the Titans, what you'd expect there, or currently Derrick Henry on the Ravens, what you might expect there. It's going to do a lot of damage later, and that damage is going to accumulate. You can maximize that by combining that with white, which is like a really protective. So if you've got a fairly safe defense, that would be like a white-green deck. So the Ravens don't quite have that, but there are, combinations of that, like the like the Mike Zimmer offense defense combination with Dalvin Cook and that defense that didn't get a ton of turnovers but didn't give up a lot of points. That's that probably a turnover heavy defense is probably like a black deck. So that would be like the Ravens. It might be the McDonald defense over in that city that I don't think has an NFL team. I think that kind of draining from your opponent, turning your opponent's weaknesses into your strengths, that's kind of black. I don't know what Azorius is, but I assume it's some kind of blue, probably with white, because otherwise you would just say blue instead of Azorius. That deck is annoying. White blue decks are annoying. You're an annoying person if you play them. That's the whole point of blue, and white seems to magnify it for some reason. It's very difficult to get a handle on. Blue does all kinds of wonky, weird stuff. It used to be that, I don't think this is a rule in Magic anymore. It used to be that blue had access to a category of spells that resolved faster than everyone else's spells. So if you cast a spell, this is a different spell category. So if you cast a spell that's like an enchantment, on your turn on like one of your creatures, like let's say I cast a spell to make this creature stronger, the other player could cast a spell like an instant. Even though it's your turn, they can cast a spell that's an instant that resolves faster than yours. So for example, they could play a spell called Counterspell, which would eliminate your enchantment, right? And then you could cast an instant on top of that, and because you just cast it, it's going to resolve first. So you could have a counterspell for that counterspell or something like that, right? Blue had first of all, blue has a bunch of counterspells in their deck. So they already do that stuff that annoys you. You've got all these plans, and then blue disrupts those plans. They used to have a category of spell called interrupts, which were even faster than instants. And so you could not play an instant to counter an interrupt because an interrupt was faster. That's annoying stuff. And they were basically the ones that had access to it. They do all kinds of like really annoying, like they draw a ton of cards. They get ahead of the mana curve really quickly. They cycle through all kinds of, it's annoying. I hate them. I am very good at playing as blue, which is probably not surprising. That to me is probably what the McDaniel offense is. Like, I know they're fast, and so you would think, like, with the way I described red would be McDaniel, but they're annoying, and they get ahead of you, and they do all these tricks, and they're sneaky, and if you're a rival team, you probably hate Mike McDaniel. He's probably just an annoying coach. Like, this hippie, this nerd, always doing nerd stuff. It doesn't look like he's ever even picked up a football. What's going on here? I hate this guy. He's having fun. That makes me mad. That's exactly like what playing a blue deck is. So I think the Miami Dolphins are probably like a blue deck, or maybe just a blue deck, because I don't think they play a very. There's no like safety net, which white can often provide. So yeah, that's there you go. I did probably contradict whatever I said the last time I talked about this.
Probably. Can I spend a moment talking about how you ruined one of my Friday nights?
Please, by all means, yes.
So I lost a bet a while back, and
great,
had to start a D&D campaign with Luke Braun as the DM. I hadn't played in a very long time. I had not played in a very long time. I was happy with how it had ended, and now it was being brought back into the fold, and I was playing
just
a game.
When you thought you were out.
I had been out for a long time, like more than 15 years, and I got dragged in and was having a bit of fun with it, quite frankly. And Luke had asked a bit about my character's backstory, and I'd provided a couple of interesting ideas, I thought. And there was a thing that had happened, and my character had run off. I was like, I'm not dealing with the fallout of this. People had died. Mistakes were made. Questionable if it was my fault. I maintained it wasn't. And called it good.
I mean, it sounds like it was.
And then Luke, we hadn't had a session in like 6 months. We finally had one, and the person that was brought in to play the character that was supposed to be dead turned out to be Arif, and that was the thing that was supposed to like mess me up and everything. It flustered me.
Definitely messed you up.
It definitely flustered me. I was like,
yeah, you were grade A flustered, buddy.
it's like at one point I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm walking away. I am not dealing with this.
That did mildly inconvenience me. Certainly I wasn't flustered. It did mildly inconvenience me because my guy has a plot and it involves you. And so you just like booking. I was like, all right.
It made sense. But Arif just shows up. And Arif, I don't know if you're aware of this, listeners, Arif's schedule is not what you would consider a human's schedule to be, and is quite busy. So we may never play again. But it was worth it.
Okay, no, hold on.
As a group.
When we did the calendar thing, I was available on a large number of nights for the calendar thing. It was other people who weren't available. So that's not my fault.
Yeah, I'm still blaming you because of your availability. Adding one more person to this was going to make it harder for us to play again. So just throwing it out there, adding Arif to things.
I'm glad you're having a bad time.
Or adding Arif to things is always a terrible idea. Let's go to Chris, who asks, does Kevin O'Connell even compete compared to Zimmer in terms of meme ability? Would you ever use a Kevin O'Connell GIF as a reaction instead of the Zimmer one?
So I think abstractly you might. I mean, to answer the first question, no, not even remotely compete. Abstractly, you might. Like, he's a very happy guy, so maybe there are some happy moments that you could turn into memes. But like, I don't know that you can beat Mike Zimmer smiling and giving the thumbs up. Like, that's just one of the gifs, right?
Or the like putting his hand on his face in a face palm.
Right. Like, it's so good. There's a wide. I'm sure there are fringe or edge cases where you'd use a KOC GIF or a KOC meme instead, and the Dallas Turner one is a really good example of it. But for the most part, you probably just want to use a Mike Zimmer one. The Dallas Turner reaction, though, that's like pretty good. But I think that these moments are going to be relatively rare compared to like Zimmer.
Let's go to Nolan Kaler, who asks, for North Code, what does Alexander Hollins have against his brothers and Bud Grant?
All right, so Alexander Hollins, Bones, called that because he weighs like 120 pounds, sopping wet. Used to play for the Vikings, had like a breakout game. I think it was like a week 17 against the Bears when no one was playing their starters. I was kind of enamored with him because of that. He was like a great deep option, had a really good game, had a relatively strong camp after that, and then got cut. Never to play in the NFL again. He shows up, he emerges in the CFL later, catching a deep touchdown from Vernon Adams, another guy I was like way too enamored with when he was in the draft. Vernon Adams throws him like a 60-yard bomb for a touchdown. I assume against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, otherwise no one wouldn't have asked. But yeah, he plays for the BC Lions. And yeah, I guess Hollins just, the Vikings cut him, and so now he hates all Bud Grant associated teams. That has to be it.
There is a common thread here, at least. Dees asks, with Brett Favre's life falling apart, Aaron Rodgers continuing his downward spiral, and Jordan Love now engaged, has anyone asked how Blue of Earth is doing?
It makes it feel like Jordan Love getting engaged is also a negative in his life.
I didn't say it either. I've been accused of a few things when it comes to people's happiness. I want to be perfectly clear.
Being relentlessly cynical about relationships?
I am not against the concept of marriage or the idea of marriage for people. I'm not. If it works for you, great. I'm against bad relationships.
I have to clarify.
As it turns out, I do. That is how that works.
I wonder why you feel so obligated. That's so strange, James.
Funny how that works. I don't know. But I'm not against things that make people happy. I'm just against things that make people unhappy. So if you're in an unhappy situation,
your position is that getting engaged will eventually make you unhappy.
I have not said that. All I've said is no good marriage ends in divorce. That's all I've said.
There's probably like a 1% edge case there. Anyway,
I love the idea that you want to argue that. I love the idea that you want to argue that so badly.
There's got to be a scenario where it's actually it was great.
Cook, try. I figure it out. That's the phrase that got me through my stuff.
Well, a great marriage. You're together 20 years. You raise kids. Your kids are happy, healthy. You realize, hey, I had a lot of fun over these 20 years. The spark is gone. No rancor. We're going to remain friends. There are a lot of people who divorce and remain friends. And it's just time to pursue different paths in life. And you divorce. That definitely has happened.
I'm not saying that hasn't. I'm not saying that like equated like a good marriage.
That was a good marriage. You had a good 20 years together. It just so happens it didn't need to be 21 years. It's a good marriage. Happy you did it. Great kids.
It didn't.
One of them's a doctor.
One of them's a doctor? Well, good. Yeah. I'm glad that they were so supportive of him through this metaphorical.
I'm describing.
Where did he go? Where did he go to med school? Because I love the idea.
Johns Hopkins.
You want to? Oh, geez.
Extremely accomplished kid. Other kids in a rock band, things are looking up, but we can't say for sure that it's a success yet. But hey, some scouts are at his next show. So
when they get divorced, who does it matter like which adult, which one of the parents like co-signed on most of the loans? Like maybe they're trying to like split it apart so it's a little easier to deal with if he ends up having to default because he's going to get a malpractice suit at some point.
The kid's the doctor, right? So it's
yes, but you still have the kid would get the malpractice suit on him, of course, obviously.
Right, but that's what malpractice insurance is for. The doctor's not on the hook for that.
Well,
he's fine.
Yeah,
that's why being a doctor is so great.
But as far as like I'm done. All 20Q.
The cars are both paid off, and there's not very much left on the mortgage, so you don't have to worry about. I mean, yeah, you're gonna have to split it up.
Drew McGarry has a great book where like this was tried because everyone just lived forever, and like it worked because of that. I don't think it actually works outside of that with the idea of like people. Why am I still arguing with this? All right, all 20Q asks. Does Arif have any advice for Bryce Young on how to handle standing around his freakishly tall 5'9" peers? I think he should hire security guards who beat up people for photographing him. Good Lord. Hold on, I can't.
Oh, man, you are flustered.
I am flustered. Hold on, 137.54. We went hours last time without a mark, and we've got 2 now.
Yeah, I understand the concept of a happy divorce threw you for a loop, but come on, man, power through.
You. How dare you? Hold on. Listen, you miserable sack of as far as a happy divorce would go in this particular instance, the reason why it worked in the Drew McGarry book was because everyone was living forever. So after 20 years, you're like, yeah, I kind of want to see somebody else, and like they figured out divorce as a concept moving forward from there. However, the concept of like the human being of like, oh, I'm dying alone sort of thing, or we've been together for this long. It's why marriages it's why divorces after a certain age are like they don't happen very often because you've been together for 25, 30 years, 40 years. Why the fuck am I getting a divorce now? Rut? What? No. Nobody's. Stella is not getting her groove back at shuffleboard. That's not how any of this works.
Maybe you don't want to be romantic anymore. Maybe you're good.
Or at bingo. People tend to stay married because they don't want to deal with all the dumb shit that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's.
And if that's the case, I wouldn't classify that as a good marriage.
Yeah, that's why you get divorced.
Yeah, because it's not a good marriage anymore.
Yeah, so it was a good marriage for the 20 years.
It was a good marriage, and then the marriage is no longer good, so you get the divorce.
It's like when the 49ers traded Joe Montana.
No, that's not. You're not. No, there is no Steve Young in this situation.
Okay, well, I think that like trading away like Richard Seymour from the Patriots to the Raiders, great move. They got an all-pro year out of him, traded him immediately, didn't have to worry about it anymore. It's not because they had a replacement at defensive tackle, because they just didn't need Richard Seymour, and Richard Seymour fell off immediately. They figured it out. They were correct. And they didn't need another year of Richard. They didn't need a miserable year. They got ahead of the miserable year. So they didn't feel forced together. You're describing a situation where people stick together out of obligation and inertia. And I'm saying the happy marriage is the one that divorces right before that moment.
No.
It's like Richard Seymour. Just remember that.
this one instance with the kid who went to Johns Hopkins.
Right.
That's...
And the other kid's in a rock band. Yeah.
I hate you so much. I'm not even going to edit this out. Let me just re-ask the question, since I'm a little hot under the collar. Apparently, I think he should hire security guards who beat people up for photographing him without consent. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wouldn't know. I don't know what short people have to go through. I have nothing to say, but you got to trust their experiences. You can't speak for other people.
That's exactly what you were just... never...
I don't know what you're talking about, but I think, I think Bryce Young just kind of has to learn to live with standing around tall people. That's just kind of the deal, right? He has to get snaps from the offensive line. He has to huddle. That's inherent. So it sounds like a personal thing. It sounds like a confidence thing. He's got to know that spiritually, he is like the tallest person in his room, but not like in a Napoleon complex way. He doesn't have to make up for anything. He just is that confident.
I just hope he's happy. Simon asks, can the both of you give us a fast
if he's not, he can just leave.
And easy recipe to cook a delicious meal? I'm not listening to you. I'm just pushing forward.
So Ethan Klabowski, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's got now 2 food channels on YouTube, but in his original channel, he's got a recipe. He went down to Mexico, and he had this taco that only had 2 ingredients. It was a particular type of Mexican cheese and a poblano, and that was it. And he had a remarkable time eating that taco. So I guess it's 3 ingredients because it also includes the tortilla. I decided, hey, the title of this YouTube video is that it's a very easy recipe. The promise in the video is that it's an easy recipe. So I did it, and spoiler, very easy recipe. I thought it was great. I thought it was like missing something, but like 1 or 2 things, not like a dozen things like you would expect from something like that. But it's very short. It's very easy, obviously quite modifiable. So I'll link that in the show notes, or you could just Google Ethan Klabowski. I just figured out how to spell it. Google will get you back. 2 ingredient meal, I think is what it is. And it'll show up, but it's very compelling. So it's fast, it's easy. It also happens to be pretty cheap. So that's like a third part of that triangle you don't usually get. And it's kind of vegetarian, right? Like, because it doesn't have any meat. Depends on how important cheese is to your definition if you're a vegan or vegetarian. But yeah, it's pretty good.
I'm going to my stuff has a lot more in it, sadly, but it's 2 cans of, it's like a cheese soup or whatever. 2 cans of the Campbell's cheddar cheese soup. Mix it with whole milk. Cut up some potatoes, sausage, and let them warm up. And a bag of the California blend, the broccoli, carrots, and cauliflower. Add that to the water for a few minutes, and cut up some onion, green pepper. That's it. Let the soup kind of simmer. Add whatever stuff you need, and it is fun. It's like a home feel to it. It's good for a cold day. That's as simple as I got. I didn't read the question because I was just putting it in there. I had to. I'm flustered because of the stupid conversation about this marriage thing that I cannot let go.
Wow. Need a cheese and poblano pepper taco to eat your feelings, or
I may need some Oaxaca cheese. Yes, it's very possible that. What problem is not solved by cheese? Let's look at Ben Natan and see if he has any answers on that.
Ben Solak.
Oh, Ben Solak too. let's go do that. Will asks, what's the best side to bring to a cookout?
So me personally, what I would want is not something that a lot of people want at a cookout, which typically takes place outside in the summer, right? I love mashed potatoes in any context. I would not recommend bringing mashed potatoes, so don't do that. But I'm just saying personally, that'd be great. The problem is your potato related dish, like a potato salad, those can be quite good, but they're highly scrutinized and you're not going to be the only one that brings a potato salad. So I would potentially avoid that. Same thing with like mac and cheese. Highly scrutinized, probably not the only one thinking of that. You want something that contrasts with this heavy food that's going to be kind of light if it's the summer, all this hot food. And so I saw this recipe for strawberry cucumber salad with lemon cream over at Bon Appetit. I have not personally had this recipe, but I've had something very similar to it, where it's like fruit, cucumber, and a cream of some sort. It's very light. It's very summery. It's super addictive. And when you bring something that people don't expect to taste good, and it tastes good, and it matches the weather, the vibe that everything is happening at, it's a huge hit. So strawberry cucumber salad with lemon cream. I'll link that in the show notes as well.
I ended up making a watermelon thing where you cut the quarters of watermelon out, and ended up kind of turning those into a bit of a mojito. So you ended up like putting some salt on it, ended up putting some mint and some lime, and it tasted really good. Or you can just skip all the really dangerous cutting and all that, and just like make a hole and just put a bottle of liquor in it and just let that go into the
tried and true classic.
Yep, that's if you want to turn this barbecue up a notch and turn it into a fun sleepover, that's the move.
I learned about that trick when I was a child reading a children's book about the Civil War, which, why is that in there?
Somebody put a bottle of hooch in the watermelon?
In the watermelon, yeah.
In a Civil War book?
Yeah, also it was told from the perspective of the Confederates, but they didn't explain what the Confederates were fighting for. Great book.
Did they refer to it as the War of Northern Aggression?
Well, it was told from the perspective of the Confederates.
That's why I'm asking.
So, yes.
That's
and you're just kind of like, they don't like push back. There's not like first of all, that would be a very complicated narrative device to put in there for a child, this like unreliable narrator thing, and maybe you can pick up from context clues or whatever. No, you just come away with the impression that it is in fact the War of Northern. No one contests this framing that it's the War of Northern Aggression. Like, I think a slave it's obviously, I was a kid. It's been a long while since I've read this. Obviously, like a slave does show up at one point, and it's fine. From my recollection, it wasn't like a problem, which is a huge problem, right? But like at one point, someone makes the point that like they're fighting for like their free, like it's all the talking points, right? They're fighting for their freedom, but like in this vague sense, and like it's not. Nobody owns slaves, so it's obviously that can't be the reason that they're fighting. They don't really they don't dwell on this all that often. And then at one point they play a baseball game against people from the North, and it's just great. Everybody has fun, and the lesson you learn is that the people in war are real, or whatever. But mostly I learned the watermelon trick is the takeaway I got as a child.
The reconstruction was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, and honestly, of all of the lessons a child could take from that book, the one about how to get wildly inebriated is somehow the less damaging one.
That is pretty wild, actually. Let's go to Brett, who asks, what are some what are some gift ideas for the Pope if you ever meet him? The reason this was brought up is because the agent for Tommy DeVito ended up meeting the Pope here a couple days ago, and ended up giving him a football with like a family crest or something on the football itself.
So funny, dude.
And there's this long list of things that people have given the popes in the past that are bizarre, and some are bigger flexes than others. What would your gift be?
I can't beat what, and so I Googled some of the craziest gifts that people have given the Pope. I ended up on cracked.com, which, hey, that exists still. So you're welcome for knowing that.
MTV News has been wiped off the internet. Meanwhile, cracked.com still exists.
It's just chugging along, man.
No respect for Kurt Loder. No respect.
and in a twist, the article delivered. Like, part of the reason people stopped going to cracked.com is because it just kept on dropping off in quality. There are a bunch of other reasons, but that's one of them. This article delivered. The list was ordered incorrectly because the best thing on the list was the first thing they told me about, which they ranked number 15, and it should have been ranked number 1. It was from President Evo Morales, who gave the Pope a cross, except the cross was made of a hammer and sickle. That rules. Sorry, that rules. According to the article, the Pope did not receive that well, but all is well. They also gave him a sombrero, and he seemed to enjoy that, according to the piece. Other things that were given to the Pope, the owner of Lamborghini gave the Pope a Lamborghini Huracan. Okay, yeah, I mean, like, it makes sense that they would be the ones to give him that, but also, like, what do you envision happening with this gift? How is he going to use it? You think he's driving it?
Yep, I just want to see him do 11s up and down some Roman highway.
Right, yeah. It would be beautiful. Ferrari, by contrast, did not give him a Ferrari. They just gave him a horse, which, yeah, that is in the logo for Ferrari. But, like, come on. If the Pope wants a horse, he'll get a horse. I guess the Vancouver Canucks just gave him a Canucks jersey, which that's a pretty low. Like, if he could just go online and buy it for like $80, probably not a great gift. Better than the New York City driver's license that I guess New York City gave him. With an it had an expiration date on it, which I think is like a little bit.
I'm just envisioning
optimistic.
I'm just envisioning the Pope getting like a Fanatics outfit from like baseball when everything was a little bit too transparent.
I mean, that's probably a better solution to the alleged misgendering issue they had a while back, where they had to have Pope sit on a chair with a hole in it so they could check. So I took a tour of the Vatican, and the tour guide was definitely not employed by the Vatican because he kept on telling us this stuff. And, you know, a lot of tour guides would be like, they don't want me to tell you this, but, and it's like, oh yeah, I 100% believe they don't want you telling me this at all. This is incredible. Like the entire tour was like, hey man, there's a female Pope. That's why there's no tapestry here. There's just a missing tapestry in this hallway. You know what it is? Female Pope. Anyway, what was the question? Oh, gift idea for the Pope. Probably a Wiggler sticker, I think.
I think a bath mat. I think the bath mat is where it's at.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's what today's Pope on the go needs. Arif Wazowski asks, is Arif's role as a landlord, business owner, part owner of the Chiefs, and bougie cookie child labor advocate a reason for his obvious differential coverage of NFL owners, lest he be labeled a class traitor?
Okay, I am not a landlord. I, importantly, also never was. That is contested by the other member of this podcast.
It is absolutely contested. He was, in fact, a landlord. I
was not a landlord. And also, I don't advocate for child labor of any kind, including of the bougie cookie variety. The ownership of the Chiefs, I just do that to win internet arguments. It's not real. I am technically a business owner. But that's more like a petty bourgeoisie thing than it is like a bourgeoisie thing. Like it's more like a mom and pop shop, which my class interests are actually more closely aligned to the proletariat than to the bourgeoisie, despite the social condition of production involved here. So
it's a happy marriage of circumstances for you, really.
Yeah, no, that's yep. But class, yeah, I would, in the capacity that you describe, certainly wouldn't mind being a class trader. I just feel like the idea that I provide deferential coverage to NFL owners extremely comical. And I believe this question emerges from an insane Twitter thread from a couple weeks back, but it's difficult for me to remember all of the insane things people have said to me on Twitter, but I assume that's where it's from.
Well, next question is from R. Menson, who asks, for the hypothetical alcoholic food and beverage corner, not alcohol, food and beverage, alcoholic.
Right, hypothetical.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
If someone
hypothetical alcoholic.
Yep.
Okay.
If someone hypothetically left applesauce in the back of the fridge for too long and it fermented, what would that be called, and would it be safe to consume?
I know it's not called mash because that's just a very specific term in alcohol. I think it might actually just be called fermented applesauce. I know that there is like a Central Asian recipe, I think, because apples like are originally from like Kazakhstan or something, where you intentionally ferment the alcohol by seeding it with some kefir, which creates just basically like a tangy applesauce, which then like you put like raisins in it or whatever, and it's supposed to taste really good. That's a very intentional. That's different. If you left applesauce in the back of your fridge and you don't see any mold on it, I would say still throw it out. But from a probability perspective, it is more likely safe than it's not. But that's not really how I go about eating food. It's not like a 50%, like, 60% safe, 40% unsafe. I should try it. That's like probably not the way you should go about it. But I'm pretty sure it's just called fermented applesauce. Like it feels like something that would have a name, and I don't think it does actually. But yeah, it more likely than not, because the way it goes bad is typically visible in some respect, and a lot of food poisoning bacteria. So if it's not mold, it might be bacteria. A lot of food poisoning bacteria is visible in some respect, like it could be red. I don't trust that. First of all, I'm not a food scientist, and I'm certainly not a microbiologist. I throw that out, but also probably it's safe, but don't trust that.
E.T. Spaceman asks, if you had the choice of either only watching Adam Sandler productions for the rest of your life, or giving Luke Braun a compliment, what Adam Sandler production would you end up having as your go-to?
I would much rather give Luke Braun a compliment, because then it could be like a backhanded compliment, or it could be a compliment by implication, or it could be a compliment for something he has no control over or whatever. I'd much rather do that. Okay, so the reason this was asked was because in the Discord I shared what I did this weekend, which is I hung out. Actually, given the nature, I probably shouldn't say who I hung out with, but a friend came in from Seattle. Crap, I acknowledged the city.
Oh, there God, it is.
Jesus. It's not my fault he lives in Seattle, okay? He just has a job there, okay? That's different. He's not from Seattle. He's from Southern California. He just happened to be in Seattle. Anyway,
slowly but surely doxing your friend. I like it.
If there's anything we do on this podcast, it's dox people who definitely don't deserve it. So he flies in. We're hanging out with another friend that we have in Minneapolis. He's staying with that friend in Minneapolis. And so we go to the Lynx Mercury game. It's fantastic. The Lynx demolished the Mercury. They've got the number one defense in the league, at least in per possession terms, and a top 3 offense in per possession terms. They are an incredible team right now. The Liberty are on a hot streak, but they just ended it. Great. Well, not technically, that the Commissioner's Cup game doesn't matter. Anyway, so we go to the Lynx game, and we have a great time. We come back and we discover that our mutual friend has a streaming service that is 100% illegal. It has access to not just every channel, but also every pay-per-view. So that tells you right away that it's illegal. It also has channels that don't exist in real life. And we discovered that one of the channels was a 24/7 Adam Sandler channel. No commercials, all Adam Sandler movies. We discovered that another channel was also an Adam Sandler channel, 24/7 Adam Sandler, no commercials, all Adam Sandler movies. They are not the same channel. They're not, one channel is on delay for the other channel. They're just different. It's just 2 different playlists of all the same movies. And this concept was so hilarious and intriguing that we flipped over to it, and it was playing Billy Madison, which aged a lot better than I thought it would, if I'm being 100% honest. Like obviously there's like a lot of jokes in there that don't age well, but for the most part, it kind of does. And so we watched through it, and that was a great time. And because there's no commercials, the next movie just starts, right? That I did just describe that's what would happen. And and it was 50 First Dates. And that movie is a movie where Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler put in remarkably good performances on a plot that should be considered assault. Certainly unethical.
That is accurate. I had to watch that movie more times than I'd like to admit.
What an insane premise for a movie. And the thing about this movie is clearly during the writing of the script, which I assume Adam Sandler wrote, he like realizes this is insanely unethical. And instead of just not finishing the script and coming up with a different script, he just has a far stupider friend convince the main character who canonically, despite it being Adam Sandler, is not actually stupid. The stupid friends just convince him, what you're doing twice. Like the bisexual German lady that's supposed to be like very repulsive, that probably doesn't age super well. And then something that definitely doesn't age well, Rob Schneider, who is definitely playing a native Hawaiian, but he has a deeply stereotypical Mexican accent for no well understood reason. It's just like insanely offensive. Anyway, Rob Schneider, as a Mexican Hawaiian, I guess, it convinces Adam Sandler to go through with this plot where the premise is that Drew Barrymore, spoilers for 50 First Dates, where the premise is that Drew Barrymore's character just forgets everything that happened that day and repeats the day over again. So she is constantly stuck in the day before she lost her memory, or ability to form memories. So she just repeats the day again and again. Initially Adam Sandler, whose character is really good at hitting on women, but who is afraid of commitment. So he just goes on first dates all the time, and he's really good at that. He does the same thing with her and happens to fall in love with her. And then the next day talks to her as if they know each other, because they would in a normal situation, but she forgot everything that happened that day. And so she thinks he's an insane person. And instead of like him, after being explained to him, him being like, oh, okay, this is very screwed up, I'm going to leave. The whole movie is about him making that work. And the resolution of that is that he just gaslights her every morning. It's insane. It's an awful movie in terms of the plot and the premise, but it's like insanely well executed. Drew Barrymore is such a good manic pixie dream girl. And also, by the way, that setup for there being a manic pixie dream girl is also effed up. Like that being a desirable, like that's crazy, right? Anyway, she's excellent.
Ex-wife's favorite movie of all things. I had to watch.
Oh my God.
I had to watch that Rob Schneider performance so many times.
Oh, why? Why is it like that? Why? Also,
I think the third time I saw it, my brain stopped as he was being the trainer. I couldn't handle it.
Okay, so like he is supposed to be Hawaiian, because we were debating this. Like he's supposed to be Hawaiian, right? Okay, because he's got like Polynesian tattoo. Like it's like I don't get it. Anyway, insane movie. So we like struggle through the fact that we all of us watching have like a crush on Drew Barrymore, and she's doing a good job, and also this movie is nuts. Anyway, so that happens. And then the next movie that plays is Bedtime Stories, a 2008 Adam Sandler film that is genuinely, I have been thinking about this for 3 days now. I don't think I've seen a worse movie. There are movies that I've walked out of the theater, right? Like I have walked out of like Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell, that soccer movie. I walked out of the theater. It was so bad. Definitely not as bad as this movie. I hate it. It's so bad. I'm not even going to describe it. The plot makes no sense. There's after a couple days after, the friend who lives in Seattle like texted me. There's like a TV tropes entry for movies that only exist because every character is an idiot. And so like you can only have that movie happen if everyone continues to make idiotic decisions. It's that, but also the writer and director, they're idiots. And why does the guinea pig look like that? There's no story reason for that. It sucks. This movie's awful. And then we watched Blended 2008, which is kind of the opposite of 50 First Dates insofar as it's a really solid premise and plot. This is a great way to set up a rom-com. And no one's heart is in it. Not the producer, not whoever figures out kind of where the special effects budget should be allocated, not the writers, not any of the child actors. Actually, Joel McHale's pretty normal in it because he's just asked to play Joel McHale the whole time. He's pretty good at that. It's just like watching Winger from Community. Like he's a very endearing a-hole that you'd not want to actually be friends with in real life. And Drew Barrymore like mails it in, awful acting performance. Adam Sandler mails it in, awful acting performance. Probably the best acting performance of Shaq's career, if I'm going to be honest. Except the scenes where Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler are together. And then they nail it. These two have insane chemistry. Also, this is like it's like an enemies to lovers rom-com. And these are the most vicious insults I've ever heard in a rom-com in my life. And they're delivered so well. And it's so good. And I can't believe like there are these moments of like tremendous like movie moments of like good writing and great acting and incredible chemistry. And then you get into this like, I feel like I'm watching a sitcom from the 90s where they all travel somewhere and they don't have the budget to do anything. So everything happens off screen and all the characters turn their heads to the left. And then you do an edit to clearly stock footage of a lion and everyone reacts to that. Like it's awful. Anyway, this has been stuck. I don't know if you can tell from my overly extended explanation of what had happened here. This has been stuck in my brain for so long. This Adam Sandler channel and the existence of these Adam Sandler movies that I actually wasn't previously aware of. It's tough. I can't do that. There's no way. My stomach hurt at the end of Bedtime Stories. Like, you get it? Like, it's so bad. The chances that I could run into that or that Netflix movie where all the indigenous people walked off set because Adam Sandler, who they probably expected to be racist, was so racist they were like, that's not happening. That's in this hypothetical, right? Hateful Eight, maybe? I don't know. There's like a number in it. There's supposed to be a good Netflix movie that also had a number in it that was released at the same time. I don't know. I don't want to deal with it.
So
I'm giving Luke Braun a compliment.
Bedtime Stories, I actually saw in the theater.
In the theater?
I saw in the theater. My then fiance wanted to see it.
Wanted to?
Yes, intentionally.
You could not construct a trailer for that movie that would make the best editor on the planet could not construct a trailer for that movie that would make me want to see it. That's insane.
Yeah, that movie hurt. Click was not much better, but that one was.
Click is bad. I have seen all of Click for some reason, and I've seen now all of Bedtime Stories. And Click is like, if someone had told me before this that Click is the worst Adam Sandler movie, and I was like, yeah, there's probably a lot of extremely bad Adam Sandler movies, like Don't Mess with the Zohan. Like, there's a bunch of bad ones, and I can believe you that Click is the worst one. But I've seen this. It's almost not even a competition. It's so bad.
Let's go to Damian Barrett, who asks, question for Arif's Parenting Corner. My daughter has recently started binging The Last Airbender on Netflix. Anything else in the genre you'd recommend? She's 5, or to give a reference that you'd understand, Middle Management.
God, Jesus. Okay. So she's 5. So what's going to matter more, I think, is your enjoyment and that it is kid friendly more than like her ability to grasp everything. So like, if it's colorful, if the characters are fun and funny, if they're slapstick, you're probably fine. In which case, Gravity Falls. That show rules. I think you'll enjoy watching it.
That's a bit advanced for a 5-year-old, though. That gets.
Yeah, she's not gonna follow. She's 5. Well, I don't care.
There is some pretty dark stuff in it, but yeah, you're right. If she's 5, she's probably not going to catch up on some of the like darker stuff. But there's stuff in there that is going to almost give nightmares to a later, like a 9-year-old.
Right, like you're in a sweet spot right now. like if she's 7, probably wait on Gravity Falls, and Over the Fence. By the way, like, did you wait on that stuff? But you're fine.
Adam Sandler's bedtime story sounds perfect for her, quite frankly.
I mean, it's not like she could follow like the nuanced plot of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, there's like some really good writing in there that's going to get lost.
It turned into a Ninjago thing, which is also available on Netflix. Bob the Bull Sharif asks, for James's relationship corner, what would be the best pickup line if, say, you were a cranky 70-year-old man trying to figure out why Jacoby Myers threw a lateral straight to Chandler Jones, and you wanted to chat up a college student 50 years younger than you in the next seat on a flight? Well,
I guess for those unaware, because it's June, we've all been forced to learn that Bill Belichick has like a 24-year-old girlfriend, I guess.
Good for him.
Yeah.
I can't imagine I can't imagine anyone better at spending his money. Good for her.
Exactly. Good for her. Based on the pictures, it seems like they did actually meet on a flight, but I don't actually know, so who cares? Yeah. Anyway, what's your answer?
ChatGPT says this is the pickup line that should have been used. Even when Jacoby Myers throws an interception, I can still see the potential for a winning play, just like I see endless potential in getting to know you better.
That's anti-Riz. That's like, you're telling this person, hey, I make catastrophically bad decisions and I don't have a good idea of what potential is. By the way, I see potential in us. Honestly, it would be more attractive for you to say, hey, I think us together would be a bad idea. Do you want to make out? That feels like that has a higher success rate than this.
Let's go to our next question from Logan Bolsharif, who asks, for Arif's hypothetical corner, a lot of hypothetical corners today, would you trust your Hyundai with would you rather trust your Hyundai with a bear or a male Minneapolis Police Department officer?
Well, bears haven't done anything to my Hyundai.
That's how all those interviews sound too. It's great.
Yeah. I'm afraid TikTok cooked with this one.
That's how that's going to work. Also, Skimble Shanks asks our final question of the episode. How many Hyundais would I have to steal to make as much as Justin Jefferson over the next 5 years?
Okay, I did the math based off of how much I got for my insurance payout for the Hyundai, which is a proxy for its market value when it was totaled. I actually did the wrong math when I was doing the pre-show, but it turns out it's actually very simple to do this. So give me 1 second. 16,470.6. So you're going to have to, steal a partial Hyundai or steal another one and then pocket the change, or just come up with the rest of the money on your own. At that point, you're probably fine. I mean, you've stolen almost 16,500 Hyundais at this point. I trust your own ingenuity at this stage. But yeah, that's the 5-year total. I calculated the 3-year total when I initially did it. So it's a lot. Honestly, if you can do that over the course of 5 years, obviously that's great value for time. It's kind of difficult to be paid a low hourly rate if you're making $140 million over 5 years, almost no matter what you're doing, right? Like how many hours it actually takes you to steal 16,500 Hyundais. But I suspect that despite the famous ease with which you can steal Hyundais now, it would probably take you longer than 5 years to hit that total. And so there's probably better things you could do with your time, despite the fact that this is a comically easy task, literally criminally easy. And I don't mean in the fact that you're committing a crime. I mean the fact that Hyundai committed a crime. Actually, it's hopefully the class action lawsuit pays out. I'm gonna find out in about 17 days what that class action lawsuit's going to look like. I've been waiting.
It's been on your mind for some reason. I can't imagine for what cause, for what end.
I can't wait to drive, James. That sounds exciting.
Where are you going to put the car?
Who's to say? Doesn't matter, because whatever I buy, not going to be nearly as easy to steal. I shouldn't have said that out loud.
I was just going to say that considering all the work involved, it would probably be easier just to become a Minneapolis police department, member. They would just post it what the salary for incoming people are. So yeah, you're probably just better off.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're getting a pay raise, right? I think according to the city council.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody in the city of Minneapolis loves that fact. So great, I'll just do that. Yeah, everyone's gonna love me.
You're better off doing that instead of stealing 16,000 Hyundais yourself.
16,500. If you skip out on the last 500, I mean, you might as well not have done any of that.
And with that is the end of this episode of Norse Code, because being technically correct is the best kind of correct. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I've got evidently like a 5,000 word Caitlin Clark piece somewhere. It's hopefully coming out by the time you read this, but probably not. I'm going to run this by other people because I don't know anything about basketball, so I feel like I should have some basketball sensitivity readers. But yeah, so that'll come out this week, hopefully. And then next week, Ben Natan is actually writing a piece for the Substack, which evidently does not mean he's coming back for the podcast. I don't know, man. That's coming out. It's going to be about all the stuff in the news. That's very depressing. So tune in next week for that.
Fantastic. Nothing like the 4th of July and sitting around reading Arif's Substack. I can think of nothing better as the fireworks are going off, other than taking fireworks videos than
there's 100% we have listeners that would rather spend their 4th of July reading the Substack than whatever they've got planned for the 4th of July. And I know that if someone tells me that, they usually intend that as a compliment, but please just plan better 4th of Julys.
Sounds like a lot of happy marriages. And with that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Norse Code. We'll be back on the other side of the holiday. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And maybe next time, put it in a garage. I think put it in a garage next time.
We gotta stop. We gotta stop doing that one.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to lose the garage in the divorce, all right? We're not going to deal with that. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code, LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.